The galaxy had seen many wars, but nothing compared to the conflict that began when humans first stepped onto alien soil. The High Council of the Stars had long believed their power was unshakable, their prisons unbreakable, and their rule eternal. Yet whispers spread across the systems of a people from a death world, a planet so cruel and hostile that survival itself was a miracle. Those people were humans, and their reputation soon reached the ears of rulers who thought themselves untouchable. At first, the council laughed. How could a species from one small blue planet threaten empires that span hundreds of worlds? But laughter turned to fear when reports arrived of humans defeating soldiers twice their size, outsmarting fleets with barely any ships, and surviving wounds that would have killed any other being. The council feared what humans might become if left free, and so they made a decision that would change history. They built the largest prison the galaxy had ever seen. It was called the Bastion of Chains. It floated in the cold, black void, built into an asteroid laced with alloys so strong no blade could cut them and no blast could crack them. Armies of drones patrol its halls, and energy shields wrapped it like layers of glass. They said it was escape-proof. They said no Deathworlder would ever see freedom again. Into this fortress, they dragged every human who resisted, every fighter who refused to kneel. Shackled and scarred, the humans were thrown into the bastion as trophies of a victory the council believed was final. But the guards did not understand what it meant to cage a human. They thought chains were enough. They thought numbers mattered. The prisoners said nothing, their eyes quiet, their bodies waiting. The aliens mistook silence for defeat. But inside those humans, fire burned. Memories of Earth, of storms survived, of beasts fought barehanded, and of wars waged across deserts and oceans had carved something harder than steel into them. One girl, young but unbroken, sat in her cell with silver scars crossing her arms. She had been a soldier once, though her people called her only a survivor now. The guards mocked her as fragile, yet she never answered. She only watched, studying every bolt in the wall, every patrol path, every flicker in the energy fields. Her silence was a weapon, and the guards never noticed. In another wing, an older man leaned against the cold wall, his eyes calm. He spoke little, but when he did, the others listened. He carried stories of Deathworld trials, storms of ice, jungles of poison, predators with teeth like blades, and each story reminded the prisoners who they were. They were not beaten. They were waiting. Day by day, they tested the walls, not with force, but with patience. A slip in the guard's routine, a crack in the system's timing, a weakness hidden under pride. No alien believed such things mattered, but humans always searched for the smallest path to freedom, and when they found it, they did not hesitate. The Bastion of Chains was meant to hold them forever. Yet as the stars turned, and the council boasted of victory, deep within the prison's heart, the humans prepared. What the galaxy had built to cage them would soon become the stage of their defiance. For no prison, no matter how mighty, could hold the children of a death world forever. And though the guards laughed in their ignorance, the first sparks of escape had already begun. The Bastion of Chains never slept. Its corridors echoed with the footsteps of machines, its walls humming with energy barriers that shimmered like frozen glass. The alien guards were confident, that laughter carrying through the halls as they mocked the humans trapped inside. To them, the Deathworlders were dangerous animals finally caged, beasts stripped of their teeth. But the guards had not lived a single day on Earth. They could not understand the patience of those who survived storms, famines, and endless wars. Inside the prison, the humans did not gather openly. They knew every camera watched, every drone scanned for rebellion. Instead, they whispered, a glance here, a nod there, a single word exchanged when chains rattled and guards weren't looking. The younger prisoners learned quickly. Silence was survival. But silence also carried messages. The girl with silver scars had begun to count the patrols. Every 12 minutes, a drone passed her cell. Every 30 minutes, the lights dimmed slightly as energy was rerouted. She memorized the rhythm as if it were music, her sharp eyes following details the machines themselves overlooked. She spoke of it to no one, but she let her gaze linger on those who needed to know. They saw her eyes and understood. The older man, the one who told stories, kept their hope alive. His words flowed when the guards grew lazy, when they thought their prisoners were broken enough to listen without fear. He spoke not of glory, but of survival, of humans climbing mountains with no food, of mothers who crossed deserts with children in their arms, of soldiers who fought until their last breath even when defeat seemed certain. Each story was a reminder. They were not weak. They were only waiting. The guards, blind to the meaning, sometimes listened to. They laughed and called the tales lies, saying no world could be so cruel, no people so stubborn. Yet their laughter carried unease, for in the prisoner's eyes, there was no doubt. These were not myths. These were memories. One night, when the bastion's walls glowed with pale light, the first test came. A young prisoner, his arms thin but steady, cuffed violently until the guard came close. The alien sneered, raising his weapon, but the boy's weakness was a mask. As the guard leaned in, the boy's hand flicked forward, brushing against the lock of his shackles. Just for a second, but enough to learn the mechanism's response. The chains tightened, the guard cursed, and the boy fell back, coughing again. The guard thought it was nothing. The boy thought it was everything. The older man watched and said nothing. The girl with scars only looked at the boy and gave the smallest nod. The plan was forming, piece by piece, without a single word spoken. What the aliens could not see was that humans did not need weapons to fight. They carried their war inside their minds, in the rhythm of their breaths, in the unspoken unity that grew stronger under pressure. The bastion had been designed to break them. Instead, it was teaching them. It showed them where the cracks were, how pride had blinded their captors, how arrogance left gaps that patience could fill. The next day, when the lights dimmed, two humans exchanged a glance through the bars. The girl's lips moved silently. Soon, no alarm rang, no guard noticed. But in that small word, a promise was made. The walls of the Bastion of Chains were still tall, the shields still bright, the guards still confident. Yet within the shadows, the humans had already begun to sharpen their will into something more dangerous than any blade. The prison believed it held them. The humans knew otherwise. The Bastion of Chains remained as silent and cold as ever. But within its walls, something invisible had begun to grow. The humans were no longer just surviving. They were preparing. Every small detail, every shift in routine, every careless word from a guard was added to a pattern only they could see. The girl with silver scars marked time in her head as if her heartbeat followed the rhythm of the patrols. 12 minutes for drones, 30 minutes for power shifts. She had even learned the sound of energy surges when the barriers recharged. Once, she pressed her ear against the wall and felt the faint vibration, a pulse that told her where the prison's lifeblood flowed. In another block, the boy who had tested his chains began to practice slipping his wrists. Not enough to break free, but enough to feel how much play the locks allowed. He cut his skin raw in silence, never crying out. Pain was a small price for freedom. The older man never gave orders, but his presence alone made the prisoners stronger. He told them one story at a time, weaving lessons inside every word. When he spoke of soldiers crawling through mud to strike a single target, the younger ones understood patience. When he spoke of climbers scaling frozen cliffs with bleeding hands, they understood endurance. He never told them to fight. He simply reminded them what they already were. The guards noticed little things, but brushed them aside. One complained that a prisoner's chains seemed looser. Another mentioned the humans staring too long. Their commander silenced them. They are broken. They are nothing, he said. His arrogance was the greatest gift the humans could have asked for. That night, the girl noticed something strange. When the drones made their sweep, one light flickered along the ceiling and then steadied again. A tiny fault. No bigger than a spark, but her sharp eyes caught it. The prison was not perfect. Even the strongest walls had flaws. Later, she saw the older man in the yard where prisoners were allowed brief exercise. She walked past him slowly, her lips unmoving, her gaze steady. He saw the glint in her eyes and knew, without words, the message passed between them. A weakness had been found. The humans began to push more. Small things at first, walking closer to doors when guards passed, pretending to stumble into walls, coughing to cover the sound of tapping chains. Each act seemed harmless alone, but together they formed a map of the Bastion, a map no blueprint could show, only lived experience taught, and with every test, they grew bolder. One evening, when rations were thrown into cells, a prisoner let his food fall into the shadows and used the moment to mark a guard's step pattern in the dust. He rubbed it away before anyone saw, but the knowledge stayed. Another stole a piece of wire from a drone that came too near, hiding in the cuff of his torn sleeve. The guards laughed when they saw him crawl back to his cell with bruises. They thought it was weakness. It was not. It was preparation. The Bastion had been built for warlords, for killers, for beings who fought with claws and fire. But the council had made a mistake. Humans did not need brute strength to escape. They needed patience. They needed each other, and they had both. The older man watched his people quietly. He saw the girl with silver scars tracing invisible lines in the air with her fingers, the boy hiding a wire in his sleeve, the others memorizing roots and sounds. For the first time since his capture, a small smile touched his lips. The council believed they had ended the human threat. In truth, they had gathered it together, sharpened it, and locked it in one place. The Bastion was not a cage. It was a forge, and soon, the fire would spread. The Bastion of Chains was still bright with its endless lights, its guards still certain of their control. But something had shifted in the air. The humans no longer looked like prisoners. Their eyes carried the quiet weight of hunters, and though the aliens left, some of them began to feel unease without knowing why. The first rebellion was small, so small that to most, it seemed like nothing. A drone passed through one quarter, its sensors scanning, as always. But when it left, a faint mark had been scratched into the metal wall. No camera had caught it. No alarm was raised. Only those who looked closely would see it, a line, drawn like a scar, pointing to a junction in the power conduits. The guards ignored it. They thought it was damage, nothing more. But to the humans, it was a signal. They had begun to map the Bastion openly, right under the noses of their captors. The girl with silver scars had been the one to make the mark. She had moved when the shadows fell, her chains making just enough noise to sound natural. Her body bent as though in defeat, but her fingers had worked quickly, carving knowledge into the wall with the tiny edge of a broken meal tray. Her heart had pounded, but her face stayed calm. She returned to her cell without a word. Later that night, the boy with the wire made his move. As the drones passed, he slipped it into the shackles lock. Not to break free, he knew that would be noticed, but to feel, to test. The mechanism clicked faintly, just enough to tell him where its weakness lay. He pulled the wire back before the sound could spread. His wrist still bound, but his mind now richer. The older man saw all this and said nothing. Words were no longer needed. His people were already moving like one body, each prisoner a piece of a larger plan. He only watched and remembered battles past, when humans fought impossible odds and still endured. He knew this was the same. One guard, sharper than the rest, began to notice. He saw the way the humans carried themselves differently, the way their silence no longer seemed broken, but alive. He reported it to his commander. "They are planning something," he said. But the commander only laughed. "They are animals. Animals make noise when they rebel. Do you hear noise? No? Then there's nothing." It was arrogance, and arrogance blinded him. The next act came during Russian time. A tray of food was thrown into his cell, the stale bread scattering across the floor. The prisoner inside picked it up slowly, but not all of it. One piece remained, pushed just close enough to the energy barrier to cause it to spark faintly. The spark was small, harmless, and noticed by most. But for the humans who saw, it was proof. The shields were not perfect. They could be touched. They could be forced to react. Hope spread silently. Not the wild hope of dreams, but the cold, sharp hope of strategy. That night, When the lights dimmed for the scheduled power shift, the prisoners tapped lightly on their chains in rhythm. To the guards, it was just noise. To the humans, it was communication. 3 taps meant ready. 2 taps meant wait. A single tap meant watch. The prison that had been meant to silence them had now given them instruments. Their chains were no longer chains. They were tools. The girl lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her silver scars catching the faint glow of the lights. She whispered one word to herself, too soft for anyone but her to hear. Soon, the Bastion of Chains had been designed to contain the fiercest beings in the galaxy, but it was beginning to learn that nothing was more dangerous than humans with time to think, with patience to wait, and with fire still alive in their hearts. And though the guards still walked with their heads high, somewhere deep inside, the first tremors of fear began to stir. The Bastion of Chains had been quiet for too long, and the guards were beginning to relax again. The commander drank with his officers in the control room, laughing about the weakness of humans, while drones patrolled endlessly with their cold, red eyes. But silence was not safety. Silence was the sound of something building. In the lower blocks, the humans were ready for their first true test. It would not be an open attack, not yet. That would bring overwhelming force upon them. Instead, it would be something small, so small that the guards would miss it. But for the humans, it would be proof that they could act as one. The girl with silver scars waited until the power dimmed for its routine shift. She had counted the seconds so many times that her mind moved before the lights did. The faint hum filled the walls, and the energy shield flickered for a breath. In that heartbeat of weakness, the boy with the wire acted. His hand shook as he pushed the thin scrap into the shackle's lock. This time, it gave more than before. A click sounded, so soft only he could hear it. The cuff loosened for a second, enough to free one wrist if he dared pull. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stop. Not yet. He slid the wire back and pressed his hands together as if nothing had changed. The guard passing by saw nothing. At the same moment, in another block, a prisoner pushed his steel bread against the barrier again. The spark leapt brighter this time, scattering light across the wall. 2 others saw it and memorized the timing. They turned away before the guard noticed, but in their eyes fire burned. The older man, leaning against the wall, listened to the faint tapping through the chains. 3 taps. Ready. 1 tap. Watch. The rhythm spread from cell to cell like a hidden heartbeat. The bastion itself seemed to pulse with it. Then came the strike. A drone floated down 1 corridor, its sensors scanning the cells. It did not know that the girl had learned its blind spot, the narrow strip beneath its right side. As it passed, she moved. Her hand, bound but steady, slid her tray outward just enough to catch the machine's leg. The sound was quiet, nothing more than a scrape of metal. But the drone faltered, its sensors jolting for half a second. The half second was all the boy needed. He slipped the wire back into the lock and freed his wrist. Just 1 wrist. He pulled it out and clenched it behind his back so no camera would see. For the first time since his capture, one of his hands was his own. He held it there, hidden, trembling not from fear, but from a surge of freedom so sharp it felt like lightning in his veins. He did not act further. He did not need to. He returned his wrist quietly into the shackle before the drone recovered. But the test was complete. They had done it. They had moved together. Unseen, the guards noticed nothing. To them, the patrol was the same as always. To the humans, it was victory. Later, when the cells fell silent again, the boy looked across the block. His eyes met the girl's. She gave a single nod. He returned it, his lips curving in the smallest smile he had ever allowed himself in that place. The older man closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. He had fought many battles, but this was different. This was not war yet. This was the moment before war, the gathering of strength, the whisper before the roar. The Bastion of Chains had been tested, and the humans now knew what they had suspected all along. It was not unbreakable, and the day would come when the galaxy learned the same. The Bastion of Chains remained bright and cold, a fortress of steel wrapped in arrogance. The guards still laughed, still believed the humans were beaten. But beneath the surface, something invisible had shifted. The humans were no longer testing. They were preparing to strike. The boy who had freed one wrist told no one with words. But the message spread anyway. Every prisoner could read it in his eyes, in the steadiness of his shoulders, in the rhythm of his chain taps. They knew the first lock had given way. The first barrier had bent. Now it was time to push harder. That night, the prison's power dim as it always did. The guards were bored, barely glancing at the screens. That was when the girl with silver scars made her move. She had memorized the patrol of one drone that passed too close to her cell. As it floated by, she shifted her tray just enough to brush the barrier. Sparks jumped again, brighter this time. The drone jolted, its sensors flashing red for a second. At the same moment, two prisoners in another wing tugged their chains against the wall with perfect timing. The vibration carried through the structure, faint but sharp. In the control room, one guard frowned at his console. A small warning blinked a tiny surge in the power grid. Probably nothing, his commander said. The system resets itself. He dismissed it with a wave of his hand. But it was not nothing. The humans had found a way to make the Bastion flinch. It had been built to contain monsters, but it was beginning to show its first cracks. The older man watched carefully as the plan unfolded. Each action was small enough to look like chance, but together they painted a pattern. Sparks at one cell, vibrations in another, a drone glitching in a third. None of the guards could see the whole picture, but the humans could. They saw it clearly. The Bastion could be touched. The Bastion could be shaken. For the first time since its creation, the fortress had been challenged. The boy tested his wire again, freeing his wrist for longer this time. He flexed his hand, the blood rushing back into stiff fingers, and pressed it against the wall. He imagined it pushing through, reaching the others, reminding them they were not alone. The girl sat quietly afterward, her scars glowing faintly in the dim light. She had not spoken a single word since the day she was captured, but her silence was more powerful than speeches. Every prisoner who saw her knew what she was saying. We are ready. The guards, blind and proud, laughed about their prisoners' stillness. They mocked the humans as tamed beasts, never realizing that the quiet was not surrender. It was strategy. That night, when the shift ended and the lights brightened again, the older man closed his eyes and allowed himself a thought he had not dared before. They would escape. Not in years, not in months. Soon. Because no prison could hold Deathworlders forever. The Bastion of Chains had been designed as the galaxy's triumph, the symbol of control over the wild humans. But already, it had begun to fail. The guards had not seen it yet. The council had not felt it yet. But the humans knew the storm was coming. And when it broke, it would not be quiet. The Bastion of Chains had never known chaos. Every corridor was meant to be order, every sound meant to be routine. But the night came when the prison itself trembled, and the guards finally realized their mistake. It began with silence, the same silence the aliens always mocked. The humans lay in their cells, their eyes closed, their bodies still. The guards thought they were sleeping. They thought nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, a rhythm pulsed through the chains. 3 taps, 2 taps, 1 tap. The signal had been passed. The boy with the wire slipped his wrist free again, this time fully. He did not hide it. Instead, he pressed his bare hand against the wall until he felt the hum of the conduit. He gritted his teeth, then yanked the wire deep into the lock of his other cuff. Sparks flicked, pain burned across his skin. But the lock clicked. He was free. At the same moment, in another block, the girl with silver scars slid her tray against the barrier and caused a violent spark. The shield flared, overloading for an instant. The lights above flickered, and the drone stuttered. The older man moved next. He slammed his chains against the wall at the exact second the power dipped, the sound echoing like a hammer blow. Others followed, timing their strikes so perfectly that the Bastion shook as if thunder rolled inside it. In the control room, alarms flashed. The guards jumped to their feet. Power surge in Block 3. One shouted. Drones glitching in Block 6. Cried another. The commander snarled, his arrogance cracking for the first time. It's nothing. They can't coordinate. They're chained. But deep in his chest, fear stirred, because he could feel it, the rhythm in the reports, the pattern in the failures. This was not chance. This was not random. This was rebellion. The boy, now free of his chains, slipped the wire into the lock of another prisoner. The cuff snapped open, and for the first time, two humans stood unbound inside the bastion. Their breaths were heavy, their hands scarred, but their eyes were fire. The girl pushed again at her barrier, sparks dancing wildly. The shield faltered a second longer, long enough for her to slip a piece of metal through the gap. She gripped it tightly, the first weapon born inside the prison. The older man rose to his feet and looked across the yard at the others, his voice calm but strong. "Now," he said, "just one word." And every human who heard it moved as one. They slammed chains, then locks, pulled at weak points the aliens had never bothered to notice. Each action alone was small. Together, it was an earthquake. The Bastion of Chains roared with sound as if the Deathworlders themselves were tearing at its bones. Guards rushed down the corridors, shouting, weapons raised. But when they reached the cells, they froze. Humans stood inside, unshackled, their faces cold and unyielding. One guard stepped forward to strike, but the girl moved faster, her improvised blade flashing. Sparks flew, and the guard stumbled back with a cry. For the first time since its construction, the bastion had been struck from within. The commander's hand shook as he watched the monitors. He saw cells no longer filled with beaten prisoners, but with fighters. He saw chains lying empty on the floor. He saw sparks where no sparks should be. "This isn't possible," he whispered, but he knew it was. The humans had done the impossible many times before. That was why the council feared them. That was why this prison had been built in the first place. And now, after only a single day inside, the Bastion of Chains was no longer theirs. It belonged to the Deathworlders. The Bastion of Chains had been built to last 1,000 years, to be the unbreakable symbol of the council's power. Yet in less than a single day, the fortress shook with the roar of its prisoners. The humans had risen. The impossible had begun. The boy with the wire was no longer alone. One by one, the locks fell as he passed the tool between hands. Chains snapped, wrists came free, and the sound of clinking metal filled the halls like falling rain. Where there had been silence, there was now fire. Where there had been despair, there was now unity. The girl with silver scars led the charge in her block. With her stolen shard of metal, she moved like a storm, striking drones until sparks lit the corridor. Guards who rushed toward her faltered under her gaze. She was young, but her scars told a story older than any of them could understand. She was Earth's survivor, and she would not bow. The older man stood at the center of it all, his calm voice guiding them. He gave no speeches, no shouts, only clear words. Here, now, together. His presence was enough. The humans moved as one body, each act of defiance flowing into the next like waves crashing against rock. In the control room, chaos rolled. Alarms screamed, lights blinked red, and officers shouted at one another. Contain them, seal the blocks. But every command came too late. Systems overloaded, barriers failed, and the map of the bastion filled with breaches. The commander stared at the screens in horror. How? They are unarmed. They are outnumbered. One guard answered without meaning to. His voice trembled as he spoke. They are human. And that was all the explanation needed. The breakout swept through the fortress like wildfire. Guards fell back. Drones shattered against fists and stolen blades. And the very walls cracked under the relentless push. For every door that closed, the humans found another way. For every trap laid, they turned it back on their captors. The bastion had been designed to contain strength, but it had never been designed to contain will. By the time the council ships received the first distress calls, it was already over. The Bastion of Chains was no longer a prison. It was a ruin, and from its burning halls, humans walked free once more. The older man stood at the threshold of the shattered gates, the stars shining beyond. Round him, men and women scarred by chains now walked unbound. The girl with silver scars held her weapon high, her eyes burning not with rage, but with resolve. The boy who had first slipped his lock walked beside her, his hands raw but steady. The older man looked once at the ruins behind them, then at the endless night ahead. His voice was quiet, but every human heard it. No prison can hold us. Not today. Not ever. The words carried out into the void, carried by the survivors who had turned a cage into a battlefield and a fortress into a warning. The galaxy would hear of what happened. The council would tremble, and the name of the Bastion of Chains, once a monument to control, would be remembered forever as the place where humans proved again what they had always been, unbreakable. The Bastion of Chains, proud fortress of the council, was no longer the silent machine it had been. Sirens wailed, lights flickered red across its walls, and smoke rose from corridors that had never known fire. What had been designed to be the galaxy's strongest prison had become a battlefield, and the humans were winning. The boy who once tested his lock now ran with free hands, striking drones and tearing apart panels with desperate strength. The wire he had hidden so carefully was now a blade, sparking against steel as he fought. Every scar on his wrists was proof of his defiance. The girl with silver scars had become more than a prisoner. She was the spear of their rebellion. With her stolen shard of metal, she cut down the machines that barred their path, her every movement sharp and fearless. Sparks danced in her hair as if fire itself had chosen her. The older man walked at the center of them all, not leading by command, but by presence. When fear touched their hearts, they looked at him and remembered the stories he told: the storms, the mountains, the predators, and they found strength again. Guards tried to rally, but they had never fought humans unchained. Their formations broke. Their weapons fell from trembling hands. The arrogance that had built the bastion now blinded them, and by the time they realized the truth, it was too late. The humans tore through steel gates and shattered energy barriers. They moved as one, no longer prisoners, but warriors, their unity stronger than any chain dot in the control room. The commander watched the screens go dark one by one. His voice shook as he whispered, "This was supposed to be impossible." But the truth had already burned across the prison. Impossible meant nothing to Deathworlders. At last, the humans stood before the great gates, stars burning beyond. The air was filled with smoke, sparks, and the sound of chains hitting the ground. The older man raised his hand, his voice steady. "No prison can hold us." And with that, the gates of the Bastion of Chains fell. The council's symbol of control was gone in less than a single day. The galaxy would remember this not as the triumph of the council, but as the day Deathworlders proved themselves unbreakable. From now on, no wall, no chain, no empire would ever look at humanity the same way again.